In April 2015, Bill Gates made a thought-provoking and terrifying statement in a TED speech, stating that the virus that could easily kill millions of people in the coming decades would not be war or missiles, but rather highly contagious. Bill Gates even predicted the emergence of asymptomatic and superinfected individuals in the future. The speech did not cause much response at that time, but 5 years later, the world witnessed the outbreak of the COVID-19 epidemic, and public opinion exploded. Some people said that Bill Gates had always had a profound freeze, but others said that all this was a conspiracy of interest groups. In 2021, Bill Gates made another amazing prediction. He said that the improvisation phase of the COVID-19 pandemic would end sometime in 2022, but a disaster 5 times more deadly than the epidemic was coming. Today, let's talk about Bill Gates' latest language. When it comes to Bill Gates, many people's first impression is that he is the co-founder of Microsoft, a technology giant, and once the world's richest man. From 1995 to 2007, in Forbes' Global Billionaire ranking, Bill Gates held the world's richest man position for 13 consecutive years. In 2008, Bill Gates withdrew from the daily operations and management work of Microsoft and spent more time on the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, donating $58 billion of his personal assets to the foundation. However, in 2014, Bill Gates regained the top spot on Forbes' Global Rich list with $812 in assets, and by 2019, his assets had exceeded $100 billion. In recent years, Bill Gates has gained another identity, which is the super prophet. As early as 1997, he predicted in an interview that people may be infected extensively in the future with a virus that attacks the lungs. There is also a prominent year in the prediction, 2020. In 2015, Bill Gates warned the world of the outbreak of a major epidemic in his TED speech. More coincidentally, in October 2019, just a few months before the worldwide outbreak of COVID-19, the Johns Hopkins Health Security Center of the Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum jointly organized a seminar in which health experts from more than a dozen countries performed a performance called event. The simulation exercise lasted for 3.5 hours, simulating the global spread of a new novel coronavirus called CAPS. The final conclusion of the seminar was that many countries had invested too little in the prevention and treatment of infectious diseases and were not prepared enough. But just after the seminar ended, COVID-19 followed. Faced with the highly realistic exercise content, coupled with previous predictions, although most people still praise Bill Gates for his foresight, there is also another voice quietly rising online. How does it feel like these big shots are holding scripts in their hands? Some even say that this virus was created by Bill Gates and is part of the human eradication plan. Anyway, in recent years, there have been quite a lot of controversies surrounding Bill Gates, from the Freemasons to the Epstein-Laurie Island sex scandal to last year's highly publicized divorce, with Bill Gates' promotion of the vaccine being the most highly anticipated. It is well known that Bill Gates is a supporter of vaccine promotion. A public opinion survey conducted by the market research organization in May 2020 showed that 44% of the Republicans, 19% of the Democrats, and 24% of the independents in the United States believed that Bill Gates was a conspirator and believed that he planned to implant microchips into billions of people with the help of COVID-19 vaccine to monitor their actions, which once became one of the most popular conspiracy theories in the United States during the epidemic. In the end, Bill Gates had to publicly state in an interview that I had never participated in any research on satellite chips, which was too absurd and foolish to refute. However, Gates' precise predictions were definitely not only reflected in the virus itself. In 1999, Bill Gates wrote a book titled Future Speed Digital Systems and New Business Thinking, in which he made more than 10 bold predictions about the future. These predictions seemed very incredible in the 1990s, but now they have basically been realized. Bill Gates said that in the future, there will be automatic price comparison services where people can see different quotes for the same product at the same time and effortlessly find the cheapest one. Now, by searching for the product you want on Amazon or Google, you can easily see different prices for the same product, and various price comparison websites are also emerging one after another. Bill Gates said that in the future, people will be able to carry smaller and more convenient devices with them, stay in touch with others anytime and anywhere, and engage in business activities, browse news, book flights, and even obtain financial market information. Isn't this our smartphone? Bill Gates said that in the future, people can make payments online, handle personal finances, and communicate with doctors online. In the future, there will be an intelligent personal assistant that can connect and synchronize all your devices, whether you are at home or in the office. They can freely exchange data between devices, help you check emails, notify you of important itineraries, and even guide you in cooking food. Today's Google Assistant is a representative product in this field. Bill Gates also believes that real-time home monitoring devices will be popularized in the future. If someone visits you when you go out, the system will automatically notify you. In the future, everyone will have their own private online space where they can upload information, chat with others, or plan activities. Isn't that all kinds of social media nowadays? As long as you make a good travel plan, there will be specialized software to notify you of booking information, provide you with various activity suggestions upon arrival at your destination, and also provide recent preferential policies for these activities. This is the future smart advertising, which will display advertisements that you may be interested in based on your preferences and purchasing tendencies. Future job seekers can indicate their interests, needs, and professional skills online to find suitable job opportunities. Bill Gates' predictions have now penetrated into every aspect of our daily lives, but in the last century, they were still high-tech that most ordinary people couldn't even think of. It has to be said that the business tycoon is the tycoon. His insight is obvious to all. In February 2021, Bill Gates told YouTube that after the end of the COVID-19 epidemic, people will face two more terrible disasters in the future. The first type is bioterrorism attacks, where terrorists may manufacture biological and chemical weapons and artificially spread viruses with extremely high mortality rates. The second type is climate change, and humans are always insignificant in front of nature. Once the climate changes, no living thing can be spared. In August 2020, when the global epidemic was still at its peak, Bill Gates appealed to everyone not to ignore one thing and lose another. The COVID-19 was terrible, but climate change might be worse. At that time, the global death toll had exceeded 600,000. Based on this benchmark, Bill Gates calculated that by 2060, climate change might be as deadly as COVID-19, or even 5 times as deadly as COVID-19. In the next decade or two economically, the losses caused by climate change will be equivalent to a pandemic equivalent to the COVID-19 epidemic every 10 years. Bill Gates has released a new book, Climate Economy and the Future of Humanity, which is the only book he has written since entering the 21st century. The book only discusses one thing, the global crisis that climate change will bring and the ways we should respond to it. So is climate change really so scary? In the book, Bill Gates said that a change of a few degrees Celsius in the field of climate can have a huge impact. In the last ice age, the global average temperature was only 6 degrees Celsius lower than today, and in the dinosaur era, the global average temperature was only about 4 degrees higher than today, and at that time, there were still crocodiles living in the Arctic region. At present, the average global temperature has only increased by 1 degree Celsius compared to before industrialization, but it is this difference in Celsius that has exacerbated the melting of glaciers, accelerated species extinction, frequent disasters, and climate change that have turned large areas of fertile farmland into deserts. According to the current trend, by the mid-20th century, the global average temperature will rise by 1.5 to 3 degrees Celsius, and by the end of the 21st century, it will rise by 4 to 8 degrees Celsius. What serious consequences will this have? Firstly, if the global temperature rises by 2 degrees Celsius, the geographical distribution of vertebrates will decrease by 8%, the distribution of plants will decrease by 16%, and the geographical distribution of insects will decrease by 18%. If the temperature rises by 1.5 to 3 degrees Celsius, the wheat and corn production in southern Europe will be reduced by half. In sub-Saharan Africa, the season suitable for crop growth will be shortened by 20%, and food prices in impoverished areas will increase by 20% or even more. The extreme drought in China may lead to the global food crisis because China's agricultural system provides wheat, rice, and corn for 1/5 of the world's population. It is not only a drought problem, but also more water will evaporate from the ground to the air as the temperature rises. However, water vapor cannot stay in the air all the time, and eventually it will fall down, causing rainstorm and flood. Bill Gates attributed the main cause of global warming to greenhouse gas emissions caused by human activities, with humans emitting as much as 51 billion tons of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere each year. So what kind of concept is this? If all the emission reduction policies of various levels of government in the United States are added together, by 2030, a total of only 300 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions can be reduced, which is 0.58% of 51 billion tons. If more than 190 countries that have signed the Paris Climate Change Agreement can fulfill their commitments to actively reduce emissions, the annual emissions of greenhouse gases will decrease by 3.1 to 6 billion tons by 2030, which is only about 1/10 of 51 billion tons. If more than 190 countries that have signed the Paris Climate Change Agreement can fulfill their commitments to actively reduce emissions, the annual emissions of greenhouse gases will decrease by 3.1 to 6 billion tons by 2030, which is only about 1/10 of 51 billion tons. If humans no longer emit greenhouse gases from today on, then 1/5 of the greenhouse gases previously emitted will remain in the atmosphere after 10,000 years. Currently, almost all aspects of social operation will cause greenhouse gas emissions, including industrial production and manufacturing, power generation and storage, transportation and planting, animal husbandry and aquaculture, and so on. Taking animal husbandry as an example, about 10,000 years ago, people began to domesticate animals according to their own wishes. Today, there are approximately 19 billion chickens, 1.5 billion cows, 1 billion sheep, and 1 billion pigs living on the surface of the earth, which have not yet been eaten. According to research data from The Economist magazine, approximately 50 billion chickens, 1.5 billion pigs, and 500 million sheep are slaughtered for consumption each year, with beef being the most serious culprit in greenhouse gas emissions, as cows are very typical ruminants. Cows often burp and fart, resulting in a large amount of methane being emitted into the atmosphere, and methane is the most powerful greenhouse gas, causing a greenhouse effect 22 times that of carbon dioxide. In 2014, a bizarre explosion occurred on a farm in the town of Rasdorf in central Germany. The cause was the accumulation of cow farts in the air caused by poor ventilation in the cowshed during the winter. An accidental electrostatic reaction generated sparks that ignited the cow fart, demonstrating the power of cow burping and farting. At present, the situation is urgent. Is Bill Gates right in saying that greenhouse gases contribute to global warming, which was previously almost a consensus among humans, but has been increasingly challenged recently? Not only so-called conspiracy theorists, but more and more experts and scholars are also jumping out and saying that global warming is a big lie, and greenhouse gases causing global warming is a scam manipulated by major powers. We analyze layer by layer, and first of all, global climate change itself is not a conspiracy theory. There is already countless data to support it, which is an undeniable fact. The conclusions drawn by government research institutions and universities in various countries around the world are basically consistent, that is, the Earth is rapidly warming. Some people may have said that he is wrong. My home has been getting colder and colder in the past 2 years. We need to clarify that the definition of global warming is a climate change that increases the average temperature of the Earth during a certain period of time. Please note that this statement refers to the average temperature. I can only say that this question cannot provide a clear answer. After the Industrial Revolution, the environmental pollution caused by human activities and the significant emissions of greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide and methane are facts, as well as the rise in global average temperatures and their catastrophic effects. But the disagreement in the scientific community lies in whether there is a causal relationship between the two, and whether it is actually a conspiracy or a conspiracy depends entirely on the perspective and way we view the problem. On the one hand, energy conservation, emission reduction, green and low carbon are indeed a relatively healthy way of life, and there is nothing wrong with doing our best to protect the Earth's environment that relies on survival. But on the other hand, proposing energy conservation and emission reduction now is equivalent to choking the economic lifeline of developing countries. Currently, 31 developed countries around the world have basically achieved carbon peak, and their economic development and wealth accumulation are achieved through almost unlimited consumption of fossil fuels. But developing countries are different. Currently, developing countries are likely to be in a critical period of rapid economic catch-up, and economic development requires energy support. Before non-carbon energy becomes the main energy source, limiting carbon emissions in developing countries is equivalent to strangling their development rights. Carbon reduction has ultimately become a game between countries and people, which is why the once highly unpopular Copenhagen Conference in 2009 ultimately turned into a pot of paste. At the beginning of the conference, it was proposed to allocate carbon emission rights for various countries in the coming decades. One plan was for 27 developed countries with a total population of 1.1 billion at that time to own 44% of the total carbon emission rights, while the remaining 56% of the carbon emission rights would be allocated by more than 100 developing countries with a population of 5.5 billion. The magical thing is that this plan is still the most friendly to developing countries among the 7 proposed plans at the conference. Over the past 100 years, developed countries have far exceeded developing countries in carbon emissions. However, according to this allocation plan, developed countries not only do not have to pay for history but also can continue to enjoy it. It can be imagined that during the nearly 2 weeks of meetings, there has been a lot of noise both inside and outside the venue, and of course, the final discussion has completely collapsed. 6 years later, various countries learned from the previous lesson and did not develop mandatory plans. Instead, they provided a broad framework for action, allowing countries to voluntarily make emission reduction commitments based on their own circumstances. Eventually, more than 190 countries signed the Paris Climate Change Agreement. If there are very strict international restrictions on future emissions, then the carbon dioxide emission rights will become a very, very scarce commodity, and if you want to emit, you may have to buy indicators. Whether you are willing to admit it or not, energy conservation and emission reduction have risen from a moral level to an economic level. Carbon emissions are no longer just words of mouth, but can be exchanged for real gold and silver. Tesla earned $1.58 billion in operating revenue in 2020 by selling carbon emission points, which is more than twice the annual net profit. It's no exaggeration to say that selling carbon credits is more profitable than selling cars, so I'll ask if it's magical or not. The concept of carbon neutrality, which has been hyped up in recent years, refers to achieving zero greenhouse gas emissions. Zero emissions do not mean no emissions, but rather the use of renewable energy, recyclable materials, and afforestation carbon capture to reabsorb the carbon emitted by oneself, achieving positive and negative offset and achieving relative zero emissions. To achieve true emission reduction, everyone actually understands in their hearts that relying solely on verbal promises and moral constraints is not enough. At this point, the market leader has become a powerful weapon, quantifying carbon emissions into a tradable commodity, and every ton of emissions in the future means a loss of money. The government sets a cap on the carbon emissions of enterprises and allocates this amount in the form of emission quotas, or sells it to enterprises. Enterprises that exceed the limit need to purchase additional emission rights, and those that are not used up can be stored or sold. Alright, that's all for today's story. Thank you for reading. Welcome to subscribe to my channel, because there will always be novel stories waiting for you here.